There we have it, the last desperate act of a party that has failed.
Keir Starmer, leader of the Labour Party and the man hoping to get his hands on the keys to number 10.
My strong sense across the country is people are just fed up with this. They've had enough now, and they want to get on with change.
Britain deserves better, and Labour are ready.
Starmer leads in the polls in an election year that could see a devastating loss for the Conservative Party after 14 years in power.
Cheer up, Rishi!
You, the Mirror readers, have questions for the leader of the opposition. So, at the Mirror's HQ, we put them to him ahead of one of the most important elections in a generation.
It looks like I've gone for a job interview.
Will you keep the triple lock? What are Labour's plans to save our wonderful NHS?
How are you going to sort the mess out?
Will the new Labour government reintroduce free TV licences for people over 75?
Do you think that Lee Anderson will retain his seat?
No, I don't.
That's on it.
So look, thank you very much for coming, and
Not at all.
we appreciate how busy you are, so it's super for all of us to meet with you. And we have been inundated with reader questions.
Very
And
good.
we'd like to, we'll start with those, some
Yeah,
nice,
yeah.
easy-ish ones, and we'll open to the
Or
floor
Arsenal
as
going to win
well.
the Premier League?
So are you comfortable, ready
Yeah,
to get
yeah,
started?
absolutely.
Okay, so Lucy Broadbent, we are tired and broken as people and as a nation. Are you going to sort this mess out?
Yes.
How are you going to sort the mess out?
Well, let's acknowledge the mess, because this is 14 years of failure, and I don't think anybody would be bold enough to make the argument that things are better now than they were 14 years ago. And that's unforgivable in politics. It doesn't really matter which political party you're from, which political party you support. If you leave your country worse than when you started in government, that is unforgivable. So whether the economy is broken, health service is broken, public service is broken, and so there's a lot of mess to pick up and fix. The only way I think for us to do that is to have a mission, what I've called a mission-driven government, which is a government with a driving sense of purpose, where we're not just doing sticky plaster politics, we're not just sort of picking things up as best we can, we're actually fundamentally changing the country for the better. And that's why I've picked my 5 missions for government, and that will drive everything that we do. So, you know, given the state of the country, there is so much that needs to change. We've got to be absolutely focused, and we'll be focused on those 5 missions.
Okay, so can you give us a bit more detail about that today?
Yeah, I mean, well, the missions, you'll have all keenly watched the missions and commented on the speeches, no doubt. But I mean, the 5 big things are obviously, the first and foremost is getting the economy going and making sure it works everywhere across the country and is improving. At the heart of almost everything that's gone wrong in the last 14 years is the fact the economy is not working. We haven't had significant growth for 14 years. We're flatlining in recession now. That has a massive impact on the whole country, so that has to be turned around. And we have to have the ambition that that's not just London and the South East, it's across every single place in the country where living standards are felt to be improving. So that's got to be mission number 1. That won't happen if we don't change the mindset of government. We've got to be in a partnership with business across the country. We've got to be working much more closely with our mayors, with our councils, with our devolved authorities, and bringing a completely different mindset to it. So that's mission number 1, followed very closely by mission number 2, which is the health service. My wife works in the NHS, as I've mentioned on a number of occasions. But it's on its knees, and everybody here will know that. You're doing Dentistry on your front page campaign. Health, dentistry, mental health, they're in a shocking state. A state I think most people would have felt would never have happened in this country. So we've got to pick that up, mend it, and make the NHS fit for the next 75 years, because we, as a Labour Party, we proudly look back on the creation of the NHS as one of our greatest achievements. But simply putting it back where it was, over those 75 years isn't going to be enough. We've got to change it. It's got to go to a preventative model, much more emphasis on mental health, much closer to where people are. So, and this is also a story about growth in the economy, because when you got 7.6 million people on a waiting list, you've got a lot of people who aren't going to work, and that has an impact on the economy. The third mission is all about the transformation in energy that we have to run towards, so clean energy, clean power by 2030. That is a massive thing of transformation across the country. But that will bring with it lower bills, energy security, so Putin can't put his boot on our throat, and the next generation of jobs, followed closely by a mission on opportunity and skills. Too many young people not coming out of school and college with the skills they need for the jobs they're actually going to do and the lives they're actually going to lead. And the fifth one is making sure that we're safe as communities, safe streets, safe communities. And within that, a mission, the only time an opposition or a government has ever committed to it, which is halving violence against women and girls. That is really hard to do, massively needed. So there's if we get the chance, we will have a real driving sense of mission. And if we bring about that change, then in 10 or 20 years, people will look back and say that really was a transformative Labour government. So that's the scale of the task and the ambition that we've got for the country. Obviously, we've got to persuade people to vote for us in the coming election. And I have to remind the Shadow Cabinet every week to get from where we landed in 2019 after a disastrous election to even a small Labour government with a majority is a bigger swing than Blair got in 97. That's how hard it is, which is why we will maintain our no complacency, complete focus and discipline as we go forward.
So no pressure.
No pressure. But this is what we came into it for. I mean, it is a tall order. I've got a habit of sort of picking up things when they're in a bad place. So picked up the Labour Party in 2019 and most people said, good luck, Keir. It was 4th of April 2020 when I took over. So most people said good luck. And then the next breath said, you'll never turn it around in 5 years. You're not going back into government in one term. And we did. So, yeah, the scale of the difficulties across the country is huge. But we're up for it. That's what we came into this for. We just want the chance to get on with it now.
Brilliant, and that's exactly what we want to hear. So let's take you back to another reader question. So Sandy
I better
Crump.
drink out of my mirror.
Good opportunity. Super. So Sandy Crump from the Isle of Wight said, what are Labour's plans, and you've touched upon this actually, so what are Labour's plans to save our wonderful NHS, which has been decimated by the Tories?
Well, the first thing is we've got to fix the immediate problems. So the waiting list has to come down. And that's why we've got a plan for round-the-clock work in the NHS with the staff of the NHS, bringing those waiting lists down by 2 million extra appointments every year to drive that down. This is what the last Labour government did, by the way. We put in place a whole set of targets to bring the waiting list down, and we succeeded in doing so. It can be done. So that's the immediate thing. We've got to start fixing the dentistry problem. This is a shocking state of affairs with 700,000 emergency appointments available, making sure that newly qualified dentists go to the areas where there's dentist deserts at the moment, where you simply can't get a dentist appointment for love nor money. That's fixing the immediate stuff. Longer, that will be good, make a material difference, but that won't ensure the NHS on its own survives the next 50 years. To do that, we have to change the model, preventative stuff, making sure that we're getting in early, making sure that health is much more available in our communities, and having a much greater focus on mental health. So we've got a big ambition for mental health professionals, particularly for young people. I've been really struck by how young people are affected by mental health, more than I was expecting in the pandemic. In the pandemic, I kind of thought it'll be older people who are isolating who will be most affected. And actually it was young people, particularly teenagers, who are missing out on vital parts of their development. So huge amount to do on the NHS.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, our dentist campaign has really hit hard.
It's really good.
But
it's really needed. And I don't know I'd be really interested to know what your readership numbers and things are like for that campaign in particular, because at the beginning of the year, we went out to talk through our missions, and the one on health we wrapped together with dentistry and went across the country. The dentistry bit was the bit that everybody was really interested in. really, even more than the broad NHS waiting list stuff, was people desperately saying, I can't get a dentist appointment.
Yeah.
It is impossible to get an NHS dentist where I am. It really took off.
I mean,
so I imagine there's a lot of following for your campaign.
Huge following. Kane Parker, he sent in a question. He's from Leeds, and he said, asking what your plan is, of course, but he said in his area, it's 7 years plus, and he's not alone actually in that area to get an NHS appointment. And like Kane and like many others, they can't afford private private dentistry. So
it's really shocking, and you've got these areas where it is almost impossible to get an NHS doctor, and some people simply can't afford it. So these stories, sometimes when you hear stories about people pulling their own teeth, you think that can't be real, and then you learn that it is, and it's awful. Or people have got the money going abroad to have all sorts of dentistry in circumstances that aren't always ideal.
Yeah, just shouldn't be happening in this day and age.
They really shouldn't. You shouldn't have to run a campaign on the basics of dentistry. But it's very good you're doing it, but you shouldn't have to.
Great.
It's something, I mean, I don't know what other people feel in the room, but I mean, did you ever think it would get to this stage where we're in 2024 having a conversation about whether you can get basic dentistry in the United Kingdom? I mean, it's shocking. Or where the NHS is on its knees, and anybody who's been in A&E recently will know just how bad it is, just how tough it is.
Yeah, exactly. Does anyone want to? Chris?
Just use Fred's editor. How concerned are you about the Donald Trump comeback and the ensuing pain that would cause NATO? What could a Labour government do for Ukraine in terms of, can you improve it? Would you be able to improve it? And on defence spending, would you stay at 2.5 or would you look to increase it if possible? I know everyone's skin, but is it?
That's a good wrap of at least 5 questions there in one. I mean, look, let's take that in stages. Firstly, the position on Ukraine will not change if there's a change of government, and that's very important. So in the 2 years or so that the conflict's been going on, we have been very clear in saying that the government and the opposition stand united on this. That's been very important for Ukraine to hear, because what Putin wants is to see allies falling out, to see political parties falling out, and to see division. We won't allow that to happen. I went to Kyiv to see President Zelensky and to deliver that message, which is, whatever the government, if there's an incoming Labour government, it will be the same commitment. That is very important to link it to the earlier part of your question, because obviously there are going to be US elections in November this year. There could be a change of presidency in the US. On that issue, we will work with whoever the Americans return as their president, obviously, as we would with any other leader across the globe. But it is going to put additional pressure on Europe, I think, and we have to step up in Europe and be very clear about what our commitments are. On the 2.5, I mean, that's what we achieved under the last Labour government. As we left office, it was on 2.5, and so clearly want to get to that. I think before we get to that, we do want to do a review of defence and security to look at exactly what we've got, the sort of state of affairs. I am worried that many things, if we do get privileged to come into government, will be worse than is even known at the moment, and so we need to do that review very, very quickly. But the position on Ukraine remains as it always was.
Niamh, another question from the floor.
Would you follow the US in clamping down on TikTok if you came into power?
Well, I'd have to talk to my daughter first. Look, I do think I think whether it's TikTok or anything else, we do have to understand the nature of the risks that are involved in potential interference and be aware of them. I think when it comes to TikTok, there's a difference between political use and social use, but we do need to be aware of the dangers. I mean, there's a chance to do a bit of that in the legislation going through, but they're not closing down altogether.
Great, thank you. Pete Lamas from Broughton, along with several others actually, said, will you keep the triple lock for pensioners?
Oh, the triple lock's really important, and it is, again, surprising that the government is sort of causing concern by wavering in its commitment. It made that commitment, it should stick to that commitment, and we believe in it.
Brilliant. I think that will be
and I think also a lot of pensioners will reflect on the budget of 2 weeks ago and say, actually, we were the losers from this budget.
Oh, 100%.
You know, that's amongst the reasons that budget has not been the game changer that the government thought it was going to be. I mean, it's incredible to go through a budget like that 2 weeks ago. Nobody's even talking about it anymore, other than, and I think I'm right in saying I was launching Sadiq Khan's mayoral election this morning at the same time as the Prime Minister was doing his speechette. I think it was more et than speech. But he's doubling down on this getting rid of national insurance, which they trailed at the end of the budget. National insurance, as you know, is used almost exclusively for pensions and welfare payments, pensions in particular, and for the NHS, so it's a huge amount of money. That commitment to simply get rid of national insurance is a £46 billion commitment, unfunded commitment. Now, you might have thought after the Liz Truss experiment that even Rishi Sunak had got the message that unfunded commitments are not a good idea. This is, I think, £1 billion more than Liz Truss put on the table. So they're saying on the one hand, we're going to get rid of national insurance. They're refusing to say on the other hand, well, what's the impact then on pensions or the NHS? Or are you simply going to raise other taxes to make up the shortfall? Because you can't have it both ways. Either you're going to lose £46 billion into the economy, which is used for the NHS and for pensions, which is not a good idea. Or if you're not going to impact, then you must be raising the equivalent tax elsewhere, in which case it doesn't really count for very much. But that's a massive gap now in their sums, and you know, they carry that into the election now, because you'll press them, no doubt, to say, when you said you're going to get rid of national insurance, is it going to be in your manifesto? Are you going to do it? And if the answer to that is yes, then the next question is, well, how are you funding £46 billion then? Where's that coming from?
Yeah. Talking of Rishi getting the message or not getting the message, he marked International Women's Day by telling us that he could make the beds better than his wife, that he could load the dishwasher better, and that he was a better cook. So, when you get into number 10, will you be leaving in the middle of the day to check that the beds are made correctly?
Absolutely not. And if I even thought about it, I'd get really short shrift. There's no way. And just for the record, Vic is much better at the dishwasher than I ever am. But no, it was an extraordinary thing to say or
to say at any time, let alone
but there is a relatability issue here in terms of, you know, which is why I think so many people feel that the Prime Minister just doesn't get it, because his world, his life is so far removed from the world and lives of the rest of us. So no, I won't be following down that route, that's for sure.
I'm glad to hear that. Natasha?
Yes, so I'm Natasha, the consumer editor, and I've covered this issue a bit in the paper. Over 500 pubs closed last year, and the British Beer and Pub Association say that 750 more may close over the next 6 months. Obviously, they're quite important hubs for the local community and provide jobs and so on. But landlords are being hammered by soaring energy bills and rising business rates. Yeah. So what are Labour going to do to save our pubs?
Well, look, firstly, we have to save our pubs. I think they're very important because exactly for the reason you say, they are at the heart of the community. They're the places that people can go to. And, you know, go in any local, and London has more than its fair share of locals, but you've got them across the country. And you will see regulars. That's not just a feature of a pub, that is people who are socialising there. That's where they're exchanging information. That's where they're enriching their own lives. And so, and of course, there's a huge number of jobs tied up in pubs and hospitality. So 2 things on that, and both touched on by you. Getting energy bills down for good will only happen if we go to clean power 2030. Because otherwise you are open to the volatility of the international market. So what's happened with Ukraine is that that's created volatility in the market, driven the price up, and pubs are really, really struggling. We can end that by having renewables, homegrown renewables. And if we'd gone down this path sooner, we wouldn't have been in the mess we're in now. It's the same with insulation of homes. It was started 10 or so years ago. Then they junked it when Cameron said, cut the green crap. Now people are heating their homes and paying a fortune with I don't know what percentage going straight out into the atmosphere. It's simply not good enough. So we need to lower those energy bills for good. I also think we need to look at the rating as well, business rates, to make sure there is a better sort of fairness between those whose trade is inevitably locked up in bricks and mortar and those whose trade is online. And so there's a huge amount we need to do. But we need to understand why pubs are really important. They have always played. And it's the same always. Once a pub closes, it's very rare it's going to reopen and you lose that space. And that can make a community or break a community. You go to a village and there's no pub, or go to an area in London and all the pubs are closed down. It has a huge impact.
Yeah. Will the new Labour government reintroduce free TV licences for people over 75?
Well, we don't start questions with, will the new Labour government do anything? If we are privileged enough to come in to serve, then we haven't made that commitment. But look, we'll look across the board.
I'm glad you answered that way, not taking anything for granted.
No, but we can't. I mean, honestly, the worst thing for the Labour Party is to get complacent now and think job is done. The job is not done. We've got to fight every inch of the way into this election. And it's going to get harder and harder and harder. We're going to have a campaign. You will already be thinking about this, but just get your heads around it. We've got a government which cannot go to the country on its own record. If you remember the last Labour government, we had Gordon Brown's speech, that seemed to go on forever, where he went from side to side about all the achievements of the last Labour government. And you can agree with all of them, or some of them, but you couldn't disagree that that was a whole shed load of delivery things that had happened under that Labour government, things that had changed for the better. There is no equivalent. There's no way they go to the country and say, look at the brilliant job of delivery we're doing, all these fantastic things. You surely want more of this. They can't do that. Nor can they say, look, it's been a turbulent 14 years. You've had the Ukraine conflict, you've had COVID, but what you've had from us is really strong leadership through that, because we burnt through 5 leaders and I don't know how many ministers in almost every department, so no strong leadership. So they can't go to the country on their record, they can't go to the country on their leadership, so they will have to go low. That's why they'll go into culture wars, woke wars, while they'll attack all of us on a personal level, because that is the only place they can go in this election. And we have to be ready for that. We want to make the big argument about the country and the change that we need, but we need to fight everywhere to win this election. Nothing is a done deal, and complacency is our enemy.
Great. So we've got time.
This is my introductory words for the Shadow Cabinet at 9:45 every Tuesday morning, but I absolutely mean it.
Yeah.
I mean, having worked this hard and got this far to be credible contenders, then to lose because we got complacent would just be unforgivable for the country. This isn't about us, it's about the change we can bring about in the country. And we cannot afford to let the country down, and we won't.
Okay, super. Got room for 2 more questions. So, Alan Coulson has forwarded a question. Boris Johnson made a statement on TV stating nobody should pay more than £86,000 care costs. Jeremy Hunt put this back to October 2025. Alan said, my wife is in a care home. No one is interested once a person is diagnosed with dementia. What have you got, or what will you put in place to try to sort out this ridiculous mess?
Well, it is a mess, and it leads to no end of awful stories for any family or individual going through it with our social care system. We need to, I think, start with the staff at the beginning and have a sort of stepped approach. My sister works in care, by the way, so I know firsthand just how fractured and insecure working in the care sector is and how badly rewarded it is. She does incredible work, overnight shifts, and is very, very modestly paid and hardly respected. So it starts with the workforce. We want fair pay agreements as part of the sort of incoming Labour government New Deal for working people. We're going to start with the care sector to make sure that across the country there are decent terms and conditions for all those working in care, because lots of people working in care will leave working in care, a huge percentage. The terms and conditions has to include within it progression. Most people leaving social care and care work are going into the NHS. And amongst their reasons they're going into the NHS is because of progression and security in the jobs that they would be going into. So we need to sort that out. We need national care standards. We need home first, I think, as the basic building blocks of a new sort of social care chapter for our country.
Just a quickie, could I ask Paul Routledge, columnist?
Yeah.
Do you think that Lee Anderson will retain his seat?
No, I don't.
That's on it?
Although Jonathan Ashworth just lost a tenner, didn't he, recently?
I'm a poor man's Piers, so 50 quid.
Ooh.
50 quid.
Right?
But look, I mean, what...
He's riding a wave of far-right stuff which is marching across Europe, isn't it?
But he's drifted from the Labour Party into the Tory Party, to the right of the Tory, now out the other door, to the right of reform. There is no future in that. And reform doesn't provide the answers to the very many challenges that people are facing across the country. So we intend to take that positive case and to take him on and beat him, and I'm sure we will, because he hasn't got the answers that the country needs. You can't run a government, you can't envisage a future that is just built on divide, divide, divide. And what he said about Islamophobia or his Islamophobic comments are just totally unacceptable. And then you saw all the Hester stuff last week. They tell a story about a right of politics which is rotten now. And I just finish with this because I do think it's really important. We want the opportunity, if we can, to win the election and to bring about a decade of national renewal, which is a huge ambition for the country. That will require a really steely mindset, in the same way we did to the Labour Party. We knew we had to change and we were steely and ruthless about it. We'll bring that steely approach to the missions that we want to deliver, absolute determination to deliver the change that people need in their lives. But there is also the moment for a reset, which is to say we don't have to go on saying that division is the only way to do politics. And at the moment, there's far too much of that. And go back to what Joe Cox said, there's far more that we have in common than we have that divides us. But that is true. And when we do it really well. In the pandemic, there were the huge work that, all those that we clapped were doing, tremendous work on medicines, etc., etc. But the thing that really stuck in my mind was people in their neighbourhoods going up the street to neighbours they didn't particularly know well and knocking on the door and simply saying, "Are you all right?" And that is what we're really good at when we come together. So I want that reset moment, which I think will be a real sigh of relief for many people across the country. Because, culture wars, division is exhausting. You've constantly got to find a new enemy. Most of them imagined, and then have a fight with this imaginary enemy, which the sum result is just more toxic division. And if we get the chance to reset, I think across the country, we will get the opportunity to actually move forward as one country, which I think is very much needed. Slightly longer answer than you were expecting. But I do feel it's really, I do think people are yearning for the opportunity to say, I want to be part of something. It's why we say a decade of national renewal. Decade, which you may think is a bit presumptuous since we haven't even won the 2024 election. but it's trying to be honest about how long change will take and that we want to fix the fundamentals. Renewal is we don't just want to fix the immediate problem, but to actually renew and make sure that what we take forward is better than what we inherited. And then national is really important to me because I came into politics later than most. I'm not as tribal perhaps as others. I think that across the nation, whether people automatically and traditionally vote Labour or not, people are attracted to the idea and want to be part of something which is national in the sense that they too want to take the country forward. So I hope that we get the opportunity to bring about that change.
Great, thank you. Can we show our appreciation?
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. And thank you very much. Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.